New tablecloth, let's break it in with some reviews. I was sent like 5 things to review, so let's just do them all at once, starting with Neuroscape. Neuroscape is a sort of magic-alike whose Kickstarter is about to end after getting like 2,000% of its goal. Not bad. Now, normally when you think cyberpunk card game, most would probably go to Netrunner, an asymmetrical game where you play as either a gang of criminal hackers trying to make it big, or their corrupt corporate targets who are trying to shut them down. It's on like its 3rd studio by now, with its current custodian deciding that the best thing for the game is to implement set rotation on their already fairly small community. So Neuroscape is trying to expand the scope of this cyberpunk setting, where hackers and corpos are just 2 of the many factions, which include the likes of augmented cyborgs, superstitious mystics, and rockstar entertainers, giving a more complete picture of this dystopic future. That said, I do find this card design a bit frustrating. While I do like how it has like these neon light effects that gives it this very high-tech look, the color of the card frames seem to be completely random. For example, there's this hacker-only card that does 2 damage and has a completely blue border, and here's another card with basically the same effect with a bit more damage, but with a weird sort of blue and red frame. A little frustrating when it comes to how to organize these cards, although that is not the worst color crime these cards commit. You see, there are 2 types of damage in this game, physical and mental. Physical damage is dealt in red, and mental is dealt in blue. This is shown to us by color only. I've commented on this before. You can't always rely on color to distinguish card effects, though I guess at the very least red and blue are probably the least likely colors to get muddled in any form of color blindness. Still might not be a bad idea to give it some sort of icon or card frame feature regardless. But why 2 damage types? Well, because you have 2 health bars, of course. You basically get a physical bar and a mental bar, which each get 20 health, where you lose if either of them hits 0, and I don't know how to feel about this. It strikes me as being an extra life bar you have to keep track of, but this also means that when it comes to deck design, there's no reason to do anything but pick one of these life bars to force down. Picking the other one is a bit odd, and there don't seem to be any ways to really shore up one or the other defense, or where changing tax and mixing it up has any sort of clear benefit. I guess maybe this is an attempt to block a good stuff deck, since cards are not really seriously restricted by type, where some good cards don't provide the sort of damage your deck prefers to deliver and so are less helpful. Odds are more it's meant to be flavor, but unless there are ways to interact with the different damage types meaningfully, it really is down to, does your deck deal red damage or blue damage? I mean, if I were the one in charge of designing a system like this, I'd probably have it where you have a base life total of 30, but if you accumulate 20 damage from either type, simulated by counters closing in on the center, then you lose automatically, so you can still get in with a mix-up, but picking one type of damage would be a shortcut rather than a hard choice. Then again, my sampling size are just the 2 decks that they sent me, a blue damage hacker deck and a red damage cyborg deck. Maybe other factions like corpos will get modal defenses where the damage choice matters more. We'll have to see. I mean, there is a sideboard, so there's a little bit of interaction, but the sideboard is exactly 10 cards for something as drastic as changing damage types. I don't think it's going to have the effect they want. As for the different factions, each faction gets a dedicated mainframe card which gains bonuses based on the number of cards of that faction you control. This faction devotion also applies to certain cards you want to play, as they require a certain level of devotion to hit the field. Though I feel like these cards could be written better. For example, you get a level 1 ability with a clearly delineated cause and effect with a clear target, but the second half of the card is this sort of loose sentence that might be hard to interpret. This might be an understandable hiccup if there wasn't a specific card type that had a specific rule where specific text is specifically replaced, and oh wait, there is. Tarot cards are special modal cards whose effects involve swapping the pink text depending on how it is played. A solution was sitting right there and they didn't use it. Maybe they should. But then we go from a good idea in the faction devotion system, which I will get into later, straight into a bad design idea. The worst idea. It's called psychosis. I mean, never mind that the term has a lot of weight when regarding mental illness. I personally probably would have used the word delirium, since anybody can become delirious just by spending too much time in the sun, but what do I know? Basically, certain cards cause characters to gain psychosis scores, and if those characters try to do anything, attack, block, or use an ability, you roll a die, and if it lands below their psychosis score, they instead hurt you in their confusion. This sucks. The idea of the red cyborg deck is that certain augmentations will give a huge bonus in exchange for a chance that they will slap you in the face instead. This is terrible design. What might seem like a sort of risk-reward system is instead a level of risk that I don't think any player will even risk touching unless there's some way to manipulate the risk in the form of ablation or rolling with advantage or some such. I mean, the Cyborg win con is synergy with these augmentations, but you can unlock those synergy bonuses with safer, cheaper cards that provide a bonus with no downside, making that synergy 100% consistent. Oh, but what about inflicting psychosis on the enemy, you might think? Like this card that inflicts psychosis 15 and forces the card to attack! Haha! That means that every turn you will helplessly be forced to have a 75% chance of smacking yourself in the—
Force crit!
What?
Force crit!
Yeah, at the start of your turn, you can just, make a character go away to recoup their RAM cost. So, yeah, this card's effect is never going to happen. If anything, it's just complicated removal that does not work on every target. The raw removal card that works on everything and can be played at instant speed costs just 1 more RAM. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about RAM, did I? RAM is this game's resource, which works sort of like the Bleach resource system in that at the start of your turn, you get 2 actions which you can spend to either draw a card or add 1 RAM to your RAM row. So, like Bleach, you can spend both actions building the RAM row in the early game, while later you would focus on card draw. Now, I'm sure when you were looking at the faction devotion cards before, you were worried that there might be some kind of snowball effect because the player who has more of those cards in play can get more bonuses. The thing is, if your cards get destroyed, then you actually recover the dedicated RAM, because the thing is, when you play a character card, you have to commit that RAM to them. And I might have called it dedicated wham myself, but maybe that's also a bit mean, like using psychosis as a game mechanic. But yeah, characters keep the RAM used to pay their costs stuck onto them. This is compared to every other card type, which are paid for like any other game that uses a mana system. Which I can only imagine slows the game down a whole awful lot. Like, do notice that every deck has 1-cost ramp characters in them, but on the example of how it can resist snowballing, if your characters get destroyed, that means you get a lot more RAM to work with on your next turn, so you would instead be drawing the cards you need to get out of that situation because you have plenty of RAM to spend. And it does still fall in line with things like Vampire or other things that came out around the same time as the original Netrunner, where you have to devote computer memory to keeping something running and have to keep your resources, spread out between the different units that you want to use. Each character also has equipment slots on their head, arms, and legs for these augmentations with levels from 1 to 3 based on what they can handle, and even the players have 3 equipment slots attached to their faction cards, but though more often than not it'll get crowded with viruses and Trojans. At least in the case of the hacker deck, that's what they do. There are also apparently beneficial protocols that you can play on yourself that give you benefits instead of penalties, but the demo decks did not include any. They also did not include any of the modal tarot cards either. Otherwise, it's a magical-like, with the same rules for spell speed and combat. There are effects that are instant speed, there are effects that are sorcery speed. Combat involves sending out your characters en masse and the opposing player deciding how they want to deal with that. And overall, I'm not sure about Neuroscape. While it's nice to see things like the Bleach resource system return, as well as an identity system that works in the opposite direction from color identity, and even the dedicated RAM system has its perks, a number of the mechanics, such as the separate physical and mental health pools and the psychosis keyword, feel more like they exist for flavor rather than for mechanical aptitude, unlike mechanics such as the Hive, which makes sense as both. But if that's what floats your boat, then go at it, but I think I need to see more of how the other factions work before I can be convinced. Right now, to me, Neuroscape feels like style over substance. Until next time, this is Kohdok signing off.